White privilege is perhaps the best way to understand how oppression, dominance, even the creation of subservience by Western culture globally, how it operates and is perpetuated within countries and between nations with one principal objective, and that is the maintenance of the economic superiority of the West. And that's the best way I can describe it. And that is what the book argues needs to be dismantled, because it actually harms Western societies going forward. Latching on and maintaining a system by not talking about it, but which will eventually create more tensions around the world, and this essentially in the long term degrade Western societies, is something that needs to be discussed. And the book suggests ways first to understand it, both from a historical perspective and a contemporary setting, and then the things that need to be done to dismantle it. It's really important because the maintenance of white privilege in the 9 realms of global life that I identify in the book is a source of so much tension in the world today, and it must be dismantled for both the peace, the fairness, the social justice that we all seek in the world. And I think for Western societies it's really important to understand it's in its interest to dismantle that. So some people then say, but Chandran, this sounds like a rant against the West. Nothing could be further away from the truth. This is not an anti-Western rant at all, or rant against white people. This is simply a way to us to ask some very inconvenient questions based on solid understanding of the world we live in, which if we do not confront will create greater tensions. This is not in any way suggesting that white privilege is the source of all the problems in the world. In fact, I acknowledge in the preface that huge amounts of injustices exist in the non-Western world, but that's not the topic I'm discussing in this instance. A great way to also understand it is, for me, was when I first started talking about the book and put out bits of publicity. I remember an English friend of mine telling me 3 months later, after he'd first seen the first notification of the book, when we met for lunch, and we broached the subject of the book, and he said, until yesterday before I met you, I never read your email, because as soon as I saw the headlines, I said, how dare can Chandran tell me that there is in existence today global white privilege? I'm a liberal English person. I went to the best schools. I'm a fair person. I live in Asia. I understand Asian culture. I do not in any way participate in perpetuating white privilege, nor do I condone it. Only when he opened it up and then he started thinking about it, he said he spent a whole day feeling extremely uncomfortable about the realities of what the book had, the outline of the book suggested. And he came to terms with it, and he said, I want to support you in terms of enabling this book to be understood. Not just my peers, but also my children and the next generation. So that's really the context of the book. It's everywhere, but let me just give you a couple of examples based on what's going on today. Last week, I was in a debate around the sanctions regimes globally. We had 5 people on it, and 3 were Westerns, highly qualified, Harvard professor, lawyers, an academic from Europe, and these are all very good people, liberal, but they just could not understand in their first attempts to define the problem and what needs to be done, that it was actually morally wrong, that sanctions were essentially the prerogative of the West, and that it didn't matter that these sanctions essentially killed millions, hundreds of thousands of people in places like Iran. All they saw was that the West was apparently upholding some sort of moral imperative without ever questioning the basis for this sort of moral imperative, which is a facade for maintaining the superiority of the West and driven by economic interests. So that was one. The other one, of course, is the almost predictable reaction of the West towards the Beijing Winter Olympics. Same old thing. We know what is good, we know what is right, and we need to uphold this moral authority, and we will look to shame the Chinese. And it goes on, and we have so many examples of these things all the time. I was speaking at a philanthropy conference just this week. Keynote speaker is always a Westerner. It's in Asia, but this is typical. We all know, those of us who live in Asia, my God, you can't have a keynote speaker on philanthropy and the great good that the rich of the world are doing without having a Westerner lead the conversation. In this instance, it was a professor from a leading school in the West. And here again, someone very smart, someone apparently worldly, but all his examples were of Westerners. And the most laughable one was, of course, again, the irony of thinking that the largest sort of fund managers in the world, like BlackRock, etc., should be the examples that other parts of the world should essentially follow. And I reminded him of the sort of blind spot in his thinking. It's white privilege. It's thinking that the way we do it is the way you need to do it. And he was even suggesting that Asia needs to learn from the most predatory forms of capitalism and turn that into some rhetoric about philanthropy. So these are examples. And over the next few weeks, as I talk more about this, I'll give you a few more examples in the arena of sports, fashion, culture, history, geopolitics, and even business. Thank you very much.